in the heart of Africa, one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth, is quietly bleeding out, consumed by a war that the world has largely ignored. It's not a war that fits the typical narrative of global conflicts, not one that grabs headlines, but it's a war that affects us all. For decades, this war has raged beneath the surface, fueled by minerals, power, and greed, a war that has reshaped the lives of millions, and yet remains shrouded in silence. This is the story of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a land of unimaginable wealth, plagued by an invisible war that you've likely never heard about, and once you understand it, you'll never view global conflict the same way again. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, a vast country as large as Western Europe, holds within its borders not only one of the most diverse and awe-inspiring ecosystems on the planet, but also the largest concentrations of mineral wealth anywhere in the world. Gold, copper, cobalt, diamonds, these precious resources are buried deep beneath its soil, tantalizingly close, but endlessly elusive, for the millions of people who call this country home. But how did such a powerful land end up so fragile? What happened to a nation so rich in resources, yet so poor in peace? The answer lies in the tragic history of exploitation, violence, and betrayal that spans centuries. In 1885, Belgium's King Leopold II claimed the Congo as his personal property. It was a move that would lead to one of the most brutal colonial regimes in history. Under Leopold's rule, the Congolese people were forced into slave labor to harvest rubber, ivory, and other valuable resources. Millions died from starvation, disease, and the violence that accompanied their forced labor. The legacy of this ruthless exploitation has never fully disappeared, and its effects are still felt today. When the Congo became an independent nation in 1960, the people were left with a fractured society, no infrastructure, no cohesive government, and no peace. Instead, a power vacuum was created, and the legacy of colonial division, tribalism, and inequality was allowed to fester. The independence that came to the Congo was marred by turmoil, internal strife, and civil war. Foreign powers, including Belgium and the United States, played a significant role in the instability, with competing interests threatening to tear the nation apart. Even though independence had arrived, it did little to heal the wounds of colonial rule. The true nature of the conflict in the Congo is not well understood outside the borders of Africa. Many see the DRC as a country defined by endless wars and conflict, but it's not simply a battle between opposing armies. The Congo's war is something far more insidious. It's a war fueled by resources, by corruption, by foreign interests, and by the absence of a strong, cohesive government. In the 1990s, the region was plunged into further chaos. The Rwandan genocide of 1994 spilled over into the Congo, bringing with it hundreds of thousands of refugees, many of whom carried with them the trauma and violence of the war in their homeland. These refugees, along with various rebel groups and militias, started to form an increasingly complex web of allegiances and hostilities, driven not by ideology, but by survival. In the absence of a central government, communities formed their own militias to protect themselves. These groups, initially set up to guard villages against marauding rebels, gradually became armed forces in their own right, often more interested in exploiting the land and the people for profit than providing safety. The Congo's government, too weak to control its territory, began arming these militias in exchange for loyalty, creating an intricate and deadly web of conflict. But this was not simply a fight for power, it was a struggle for survival. The militias weren't just seeking to conquer territory, they were fighting to control the Congo's vast natural resources, which were worth billions of dollars. Gold, diamonds, cobalt, and coltan resources that are essential for everything from electronics to batteries to luxury goods, became the true currency of war. These militias fought not just for territory, but for power over the flow of resources. that fueled the war economy. The international community, unaware or indifferent to the implications, allowed the conflict to fester unchecked. International companies, eager to exploit the Congo's minerals, made deals with these militias, and the war economy grew stronger, while foreign governments and multinational corporations reaped the profits from this conflict. The people of the Congo were left to fend for themselves. In villages across the country, the residents lived in fear, constantly moving from place to place to avoid the violence. Entire communities were displaced as militias took control, seizing not only land but also the resources that lay beneath it. By the turn of the millennium, the war in the Congo had reached catastrophic levels. The so-called Great War of Africa, one of the deadliest conflicts in modern history, engulfed the region, drawing in 9 countries and over 20 different armed groups. The battles were no longer just political. They had become about survival, about controlling the land, and about controlling the vast riches beneath the soil. The international community began to take notice, but by then, it was too late. Foreign intervention, though did little to stop the violence. Peace talks failed repeatedly, and the militias, empowered by the resources they controlled, only became more entrenched. Even when major international powers, including the United States and European nations, stepped in with sanctions and diplomatic pressure, it was clear that the conflict was not one that could be solved with quick fixes. The people of the Congo continued to suffer. Entire villages were wiped out, their populations displaced to refugee camps where food and medical supplies were scarce. In the cities, the war raged on, with armed groups controlling neighborhoods and extracting taxes from those unlucky enough to live within their reach. The collapse of the central government meant that the militias, once self-defense forces, were now the de facto rulers of vast swaths of the country. The government, once a beacon of hope, had become a mere puppet, its strings pulled by foreign powers and the militias themselves. The country was in a state of lawlessness, with no authority to stop the cycle of violence, and yet, the war continued to feed itself. The resources, gold, diamonds, timber, and oil continued to flow out of the country, fueling the war economy. The international community, while attempting to impose sanctions, was ultimately complicit. As long as the mineral wealth flowed, so too did the conflict. As the conflict in the Congo continues to rage, it's important to recognize that this isn't just a war for land, power, or ideology. This is a war for the very essence of the country itself. The minerals that lie beneath the Congolese soil are worth billions, but they come at a heavy price, the suffering of the people who live on top of them. But the war economy doesn't just end at the borders of the DRC. As much as the conflict is an African tragedy, it is also a global one. The minerals extracted from the Congo fuel the world's technological revolution. Gold, coltan, cobalt, all of these are critical for producing electronics, smartphones, and electric cars. But what happens when the world consumes these products without acknowledging the cost of their existence? It's easy to overlook the human cost when you're holding your shiny new phone or driving your electric car. But behind these objects is a dark truth, a truth that has been hidden for decades. As multinational corporations and foreign governments continue to exploit the Congo's resources, the people who live there are left to suffer the consequences. What the global economy profits from, the Congolese people pay for in blood. What remains in the wake of this exploitation is a country torn apart by violence, corruption, and instability. The people of the Congo are left in a constant state of fear and uncertainty, where the next attack, the next raid, or the next roadblock could mean the difference between life and death. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, there is a strange form of stability, one born not of peace, but of power. The militias and armed groups that have controlled the country for decades have become the de facto authorities. They run the roads, they control the resources, and they collect taxes from the people. But these taxes are not used for the betterment of the country. They are used to fuel the war economy, to perpetuate the violence that has become the norm. The Congolese government, weak and fractured, has become reliant on these militias, and in exchange for their loyalty, the militias are allowed to grow more powerful. What we see today is a country where the lines between government, armed groups, and corporations are blurred. For the rest of the world, the war in the Congo is largely invisible, but the effects of this conflict reach far beyond Africa's borders. The minerals that fuel the Congo's war economy are critical for the global supply chain. Cobalt, for instance, is a key component in the production of lithium-ion batteries. Batteries that power everything from smartphones to electric cars. The world relies on these resources, yet few know the true cost of their extraction. The international community, with its hunger for these minerals, has been complicit in perpetuating the war. Multinational corporations have found it easier to do business with armed groups rather than the weak Congolese government. These companies profit from the minerals they extract, but they also fuel the violence that comes with it. Countries such as China, the United States, and Belgium have played a significant role in this process. From arms deals to resource extraction agreements, foreign powers have been key players in shaping the war's trajectory. They've helped to finance the conflict indirectly by funding militias, enabling the trade of conflict minerals, and turning a blind eye to the violence that continues to rage. While international organizations, such as the United Nations and non-governmental organizations have attempted to intervene, their efforts have been undermined by the sheer complexity of the situation. How can you stop a war when so many powerful actors benefit from its existence? The reality is that the Congo's war economy is not just about local militias, it's about a global system that profits from conflict and exploitation. The world's demand for these minerals has allowed the war to continue, creating a cycle of violence and exploitation that is nearly impossible to break. But the war is not only about corporate greed and geopolitical manipulation, it is about human lives. Every day, people are caught in the crossfire. Families are displaced, communities are destroyed, and yet, the world turns a blind eye. The war continues, and the suffering of the Congolese people is largely forgotten by the global community. Amidst the mountains of gold and precious minerals, the true cost of this war is measured not in dollars, but in lives. Thousands of innocent civilians have lost their lives in the conflict, and many more have been left to endure the aftermath. Entire villages have been wiped off the map, and those who survive are left to pick up the pieces of a shattered society. Women and children are the most vulnerable, often subject to violence, displacement, and exploitation. For many, the war is a part of daily life, a harsh reality that they've never known to be any different. For children growing up in the DRC, violence is an everyday occurrence. They live in a world where roadblocks, armed groups, and the constant threat of death are part of their daily existence. The resilience of the Congolese people is nothing short of extraordinary. Despite the horrors they endure, they continue to survive, to rebuild, and to hope for a better future. But the question remains, how long can this cycle continue? How long can a nation survive when its people are caught in the grip of such immense suffering? The war has left deep scars, both physically and psychologically. Children who have grown up in refugee camps or military-controlled territories have known nothing but violence. Their futures are uncertain, and their hopes for peace are fragile at best. The global community has failed to protect the people of the Congo. They have failed to address the root causes of the conflict and to demand accountability from those who profit from it. The truth is that the Congo's war is not just about the minerals. It's about the failure of the international system to intervene and bring about lasting peace. As we reach the end of this journey, we are left with a haunting question. What will it take for the world to wake up to the suffering in the Congo? How long will we continue to turn a blind eye to the hidden costs of the minerals that power our world? The war in the Congo is not just a tragedy for Africa, it's a tragedy for the world. It is a conflict fueled by global demand, and it is sustained by the exploitation of the people who live there. The question is not whether we are complicit, but how long we can remain complicit in this never-ending cycle of violence and destruction. The people of the Congo deserve more than just our sympathy, they deserve our action. It is time for the world to confront the reality of this conflict, to take responsibility for its role in perpetuating it, and to finally put an end to the war that has cost so many lives. The war in the Congo has been ignored by most of the world for far too long. It's time we stop turning a blind eye and face the reality that every resource we consume carries with it a hidden cost. And only when we acknowledge this can we begin to change the narrative.